All right, welcome back to the Canadian Gun Vault Behind the Vault Door. My name is Mark Morelli. I'll be your podcast host for tonight's episode. Doing a solo from the garage tonight. I got my portable. Just decided that I wanted to get out of the studio. I haven't been doing enough of that lately. Been hiding indoors, folks. A lot going on here behind the vault door. Some things I can talk about, some things I can't. Very excited about the CGV relocation plan. At the same time, very disappointed. Looks like we've definitely got challenges ahead of us with social media clamping down on gun-related social media sites. I think Bumble has even declared war on the gun owners by saying that any guys holding guns in pictures are going to be taken down. Although I don't know what kind of approach for the single guys out there you might want to take, other than holding a gun in your hands and trying to convince someone to date you that it's safe. Might not be your best way. You love it, that's fantastic. You want to find a girl that loves it too, hey, be good for you. I don't know that I would put guns on dating websites. I think that would definitely come under the heading of security risk. You don't want to be inviting strangers into your home and demonstrating that you have firearms in the house. That might not be a wise idea, to have the random over and try and introduce them to firearms over the course of the first couple of dates. I wouldn't suggest that. Certainly being a proud gun owner and a proud Canadian, people ask, you have guns, and to describe to them. But yep, and you always get that question, folks, and you're going to get it. I kind of laugh and always say that if you know the answer, you don't have enough. When people ask the question, how many guns do you have? I always answer and just say a few. That's probably the best way to do it. I mean, a lot of people think that all the guns in the channel are mine, and nothing could be further from the truth. I'm very fortunate that I've had access to, over the course of the years, a number of firearms and collections, and the photography is coming in from the followers as well now. They're not always my photos. They're certainly not always my guns, and I can tell you that spending time out on the firing lines, having older gentlemen come up and say, would you like to photograph my gun is kind of nice. To know that they know who I am is always flattering. To spend time on the lines is always very humbling experience, being around people that are much more experienced than I am. I really do love the wonderful ballet of dynamic personality that floats around the firearm ranges. Friendly people. I mean, not always. I mean, you'll run into the odd guy that may strike you as a little bit grumbly, but I guarantee if you work on him, he'll actually turn out to be a nice guy. I've met my fair share of what some people in the firearm community refer to as the FUDs. And this is one of those things that I talk about occasionally with people. I don't like, and I expressed very early on in the lifespan of the Canadian Gun Vault as a social media platform, that the use of the term FUDs was not forbidden, was considered to be in poor taste, and in line with our language and ethic protocol, even extending it as far as to say that FUDs is an unacceptable term to use. For the people out there that have never heard the term before, it generally speaks to older shooters, hunters, characterized as older shooters, hunters, crotchety old men that really have no use for anything outside of perhaps their over and under shotgun. To spend any time around the firearm community, you will encounter them. Although, I got to tell you, I've noticed a terrific change. The introduction of new shooters to the sport has lightened up some of the older guys and made them a little bit less crotchety. I've certainly encountered them. I had my brush, over the years with my fair share of what some people would call FUDs. They're not bad guys. Sometimes maybe perhaps a little stuck in their ways, but And certainly willing to express themselves clearly. Hey, you get to be a certain age, you can pretty much say what's on your mind. You really don't have the time, to screw around and kind of dance around being polite some days, I guess, as you get older. And these gentlemen will sometimes, at a glance, appear to be very unwelcoming. And yet, if you spend any amount of time around them, you'll find that you'll have some fun. Break a few birds with the guys at the trap lines. Go over to the skeet range if you don't see anybody using it, and find out how fun that can be. And I can tell you right now that once people catch on, to the trap and skeet ranges here in Southern Ontario, I mean, we've got some fantastic ones. The Galt Sportsman's Club is a terrific place to go. If you want to shoot onto a very scenic backdrop, Galt does provide that. It's a beautiful place. But back to the FUDs. I don't allow people to call them that on the page because I find it to be a divisive term in our firearm community. The sad fact is that our unity as a community has always been our biggest issue. Certainly, we didn't lack in common sense, but getting everybody together. I mean, it's in large part why I created the Canadian Gun Vault. I wanted to definitely give a place for people to come to appreciate firearms, and whether you knew anything about them or not, a place to come where you could view these things, learn about these things, learn why they're important, why they're fun. A place where everybody could come because there's so many disciplines. I mean, the firearm community is this vast array of activities that you can engage in. Long range shooting, competition shooting, 3-gun, sporting clay. I mean, it's endless. There's disciplines within disciplines. And I mean, you have an endless supply of, different types of firearms, to do these things with that function differently, that behave differently, that perform differently, that, mechanically, they operate in very unique ways. And I mean, every one of them is somebody's idea of the perfection. Of ballistically throwing something, and launching it out of a barrel at ridiculous speeds in some cases, and to have a lot of fun, engaging in all these different activities. Why shouldn't there be a common place where everybody could kind of come together and get a little bit of everything? Was what I wanted to do. And I'd like to think I've accomplished it. I'd like to see more people coming from the sporting clay community. They seem to be coming now. Love those guys. They're cluing in. They're that internet box thing actually serves a purpose. There's something on there I want to watch. Maybe in a day and age when some of the older shooters can't find anything to watch on TV they like, perhaps they'll come to the Canadian Gun Vault and watch us on Instagram or Facebook, or listen to us in the podcast. But to give everybody one place to come to was really kind of at the forefront of my mind when I created this thing. And I thought, because we've been so divisive in the past, because so many times, we've heard from certain communities that they don't really care about what happens to the other. To have hunters perhaps, and, people that engage in sporting clay and, trap shooting have no interest in what goes on in the world of restricteds, can be a bit of an issue. And, because, there will come a time when they'll come after certain groups. And I mean, historically, that's what they've always done. And we see some, there's definitely some legislation coming, some proposed stuff coming. Whether or not they have the time to, jam it on through, which has, typically been the behavior of this government. If they can manage to jam something through, I imagine with several delays and with a number of mass shootings in the U.S. That really have nothing to do with us and or laws and or their successful application, to make changes that add to further restriction for the legal firearm community. I imagine that's what's going to happen, whether it makes any sense or not. So, having said that, when you have certain segments of our community getting attacked, and I really do expect that's what's going to happen, we're going to see an attack on a specific kind of rifle or a series of rifles. And I think we're going to see some movement in classifications. People keep asking me this question, and I think it's important that we talk about it. I mean, I like to keep the conversations light, and I try my best to stay away from the tinfoil hat theories, although, we have clear signs that there's all kinds of stuff going on that might make those guys right at some point. Regardless, with legislation coming and with everybody kind of, wondering what's going to happen next, it's really more important now than ever that you support the man next to you. And I saw this coming, I think, a couple of years ago, and realized that there was a need for the channel, and to educate the public, and to bring new people in, and to give them something to look at, and say that we're not bad people. Maybe just to educate them, to enlighten them to the things that we love about this, and why it's important and significant. And for freedom's sake as well. Like, I mean, to have laws put in place that could cost taxpayers, millions of dollars, and not really have any, common sense driving it, I think is something that we all should question, especially if it comes at the expense of, people's personal freedoms or property rights. And, I think that we've got to be concerned about that. People keep asking, what do I think is coming? I've heard rumblings, nothing that I can verify, publicly, but I could tell you right now that, something's coming, and they've taken a couple of jabs at it, and they're running into some resistance, which makes total sense, because something tells me that they wanted to drop something big on us already, and that it just might not fly. The idea that whatever that is that they decide to do in terms of change that may have an impact on people that already own firearms in this country, anything that they, prompt people to do, will be completely dependent on compliance. And so, if it comes down to, the administration's structure being unable to bear the burden of whatever change is coming, if it's so big that they just can't manage it, if they don't have the manpower, and or if it's going to turn like 100,000 people into criminals overnight, I imagine it might be a problem. But I think at the same time, though, we can expect some shifting of classes. I think that they're probably going to do what they did 20 years ago, and they're going to ask us to I'm trying to find the wording in my mind again. In celebration of, the strong heritage connected to firearm ownership in this country, we ask that for statistical purposes and to assist police in investigations, that you register certain rifles that were categorized as non-restricted items, but are now, going to be in the restricted class, and the last people to bring them forward and register them. And I remember standing in the lines at the police station and watching, the people behind the desk, lose their marbles as it got, 8 or 9 deep, and people are standing there with RPKs. And things were different back then. And you'd see this guy breaking an RPK out, and with a drum magazine in a box, with other magazines, like really great setups. And you see people coming in with like FALs and other great rifles, AK-47s, G3s, or HK-51s or 91s rather, I should say. All the ones I saw were semi-automatic anyway. I remember, as a young man in my early 20s, I remember seeing all these people lined up, and I mean, like good people. They're bringing their guns in, saying, okay, well, I could do this, and so, but you knew that there was a segment of the population that had been screaming that something disastrous had happened, years earlier, and there were people. There were people that thought that there was no way that they were going to be able to round up all the AKs and rifles like that. And yet, there was a pretty large compliance rate, but at the same time, there was a bit of a problem. There was also about 30 to 50% of the population out there said, "No way, I'm not doing it," and or forgot, or never got word, received notification. So now they're out there, these guns that didn't get registered. And now they've, taken that class, they made it restricted, and then, eventually, I think it was like 18 months later, they made them prohibited, to boot. So now you're in real shit if you get caught one of these. Now it's a prohibited weapon, an unregistered one, and so these guns are floating around out there now. And some people just missed the deadline date, or didn't get word, whatever reason. They come to learn that they're in possession of an item that could potentially have them tossed in jail for 5 or 10 years. And this was like Joe Normal, a guy who went out and bought himself an HK rifle because maybe he. Maybe he was enamored with the design, or he just really liked it. For whatever reason, he had this gun. He never registered it. So now it's out there and it's in circulation. I mean, it's in his hands, but then he's probably going to get concerned at some point that he's going to get in trouble, or he passes away and the kids don't know what to do with it, and so then that gun ends up circulating in this sea of criminal activity where it's the only place these guns can be sold to people without licenses, which presents a bit of a problem. Now, some of these guns that flow into this black market, I'm told, get recovered by some gun collectors, at their own risk, I might add. These things, they move around, and eventually they sometimes pop up in legitimate circles. And that's a reality, and it's certainly would be one that would be very frightening for many legitimate gun owners. When these guns turn up, now it's like, it's a collection killer. It's it's an awful thing to see something like a Thompson machine gun, circulating in criminal hands, and you have an opportunity to get it. And I would never recommend to anyone out there that you take it. That's I wouldn't endorse it because it's illegal, and I wouldn't want to do that too. As a former police officer, your best bet is to report it. Would be my suggestion to you officially, but definitely don't take it into your care. And the temptation would be great. I certainly, to see Thompsons get melted down as a police officer over the years, I had an affinity for them. If one came my way, I'd be tempted for about a half second, but I would know better. But you know what? A lot of people might not, and there's definitely enough criminals out there that would want to get their hands on something like that. So we come back full circle to the idea that there's always the possibility that some people don't want to give up their property. And historically the government has made things prohibited and then taken them, or what they do is they wait for you to die and then they take them, and they don't give them the same opportunity that any other kind of property would have to be passed down. And they made some exceptions to certain classes of guns back in the 90s, but for the most part, though, these items are collected when their owners pass on and they're melted down and they're destroyed. Something I always found to be sickening as a historian, as a gun lover, as somebody who appreciates these things. I can tell you that seeing not golf carts, shopping carts filled with handguns, like piled high, that were once valuable collectors' items, to be scheduled for destruction was always disheartening feeling for me. Anyway, having said that. If there's anything in this new legislation regarding, bans or registrations, something that might shake people's belief that they're going to ever realize the value of these items, or they're not going to be able to be passed down, there's always the possibility that some people will just refuse to do that. And when people do that, what it does is it creates this much more potentially dangerous situation. You get families that might decide to, act outside the confines of the law and, make sure that things don't end up in in the melting pots. And again, you've got situations developing that result in guns that end up in illegal circulation as a result of the bans. It actually creates this black market. Certainly, prohibition in the 20s, it created this violent atmosphere, very competitive underground atmosphere, uncontrolled atmosphere. And it didn't work then, and eventually you end up regulating things. You have to. And I mean, that's what we have now in Canada, and it's quite a highly regulated activity. Gun ownership in this country is already, a difficult enough thing to do. There's really not much more need for further restriction, and yet somebody will want to fix what's not broke in Parliament, and I imagine we're going to get some gun laws that are going to require people to make this giant leap of faith that the government isn't going to try and take their property from them. If they decide that they are going to ask us to register SKSs and the M1A1s and guns like it, anything semi-automatic, just register them, as restricted. And, if we don't get reelected, we might not put them into the prohibited class next time around. I mean, it really does require you to have a lot of faith in the good nature of your government. I'm not sure that people have that this time around. That affection or trust seems to have been lost on the Trudeau government. But whatever the case may be, if you've got people that are out there that may not be willing to comply, you could create a very dangerous situation for Canadians. So that's going to be my very short, dark, by comparison, spiel on the future gun laws that are soon to be revealed to the Canadian firearm community. But as we head back towards the Galt Sportsman's Club and talking about divisive nature, I'm very saddened when I hear that I want to use a certain type of semi-automatic shotgun, something that would be classified or categorized or characterized as a tactical shotgun at the Galt Sportsman's Club. And of course, I asked this question a long time ago, and I wanted to shoot a magazine-fed semi-automatic shotgun at the trap range at Galt, and ordinarily I shoot shotguns that are never any younger than 20 or 30 years old. Most of the shotguns that I shoot in my off time are 60, 70, sometimes 100 years old. They're archaic by today's standards, but I have wanted to try this one really cool semi-automatic 12 gauge shotgun there. And was always kind of, looked at and said, nope, no tactical shotguns on the range. So I finally asked the question, really kind of pushed the subject. I said, well, why? And, the answer I received was an interesting one. And not to embarrass anybody, and certainly, the rules are the rules. I'm not questioning that. I can tell you that when I was told that maybe that people don't like the look of them, I was really kind of surprised by that, and I kind of looked over and I said, well, that kind of sounds like anti-gun talk. And the room kind of fell silent. So there I am, wearing my Canadian Gun Vault hat. I'm a known gun lover, and I've just looked over at somebody and said, well, that sounds like anti-gun talk. And to have everybody kind of stop in the room for a second and look at me, it does. I question a little more. Well, is it just the look? Is there something else? And there are tactical shotguns that have very short barrels. They do make more noise. I get that. If you put trap loads, which ordinarily don't make much noise at all, into a very short barreled shotgun, they tend to make a lot more noise. And the range of a short barrel really is kind of limited. You got to be fast if you want to shoot trap with anything with a barrel length, less than 18 inches. If you're into your, police 870s and stuff like that, the shorter barrels definitely place you at a decisive disadvantage on the trap range, where having a tighter pattern can really be of great advantage. And so to shoot something that is going to make a lot more noise, I questioned that. I said, is it that? And I said, this gun I want to use, it's magazine fed, it's semi-automatic, but I'm only going to load one round at a time. I won't even put the magazine in it. And I was told flat out, no, no tactical shotguns. And I thought, well, okay, is there another reason then, perhaps? If it's not the noise, and if it's not, there's really no difference, between a semi-automatic, Remington 1100 and this shotgun. I'm loading one shell at a time, and the barrel length is about 20 inches. There really isn't a good reason for it, and there seemed to be this perplexed look on the young lady's face, and she said, well, it tears up the trees. And that didn't make any sense to me either. And I kind of scratched my head. And I mean, there was a gentleman standing to my immediate left who piped up right away and said, well, no, it's the same shell. It's a 2 3/4 inch, 1 1/8 dram, trap target loading shell that is the standard out there on the trap and sporting clay lines. And it's shooting the same shell, he says. And I thought, well, okay, yeah. Like, I mean, if it's the same shell, it's not really doing anything more than the other shotguns are doing. If anything, they go further out there, and that might be a problem. But she kind of was puzzled and said, well, huh. And I went, well, yeah. See, like, I mean, like, I really would like to shoot this shotgun on this trap range, but I know that you have this no tactical shotgun rule. But there really isn't any good reason for it. And I kind of committed myself to the idea that I want to talk to somebody about this. It doesn't make any sense to me that we should have some shotguns allowed and others not. And so, not that I want to muscle in or strong arm anybody, but I mean, if I want to shoot that type of shotgun and it has the same barrel length, I could understand if you made like a barrel length minimum requirement for noise purposes. I get that. I get the safety angle. If something's way too short, it swings too easy, somebody might get hurt. It becomes muzzle integrity becomes much more difficult to maintain with a much shorter shotgun. So maybe maybe a minimum barrel length would be ideal. But there's got to be some kind of compromise in there, and I'm hoping that we can achieve it, because I really want to shoot this shotgun out on that trap range. It's a beautiful range, beautiful club. In fact, I'm hoping that at some point to gather with some people and bring them out there and show them what the Galt Sportsman Club out in Cambridge is all about. It's a beautiful range and wonderful scenery there, and they certainly have a diverse community on those grounds. And the handgun range is second to none. If you love steel, I mean, you got 25, 50, 75, 100, like it goes all the way out to 200 yards, and you can hang gongs and shoot at them with handguns, which is really a lot of fun. And or rifles if it's in the correct zone. They have areas that are designated for rifle use and pistol use, but they go from 25 all the way up to 200. And you guys have seen them in the videos. A lot of people have asked me about this club. I got to tell you, what a fantastic place. Shooter's heaven. I really wish they would take on some more members, but I believe they're full right now. But if you can get yourself onto a waiting list, if you want to get to a good club, the Galt Sportsman Club is definitely a fantastic place. Great people. Certainly an interesting and diverse group that frequent that club. If you spend any amount of time over at the handgun range, you're going to run into guys, fantastic people. I won't name names except maybe for Mikey, because if you just look for the wild man that's shooting some kind of gigantic hand cannon at ridiculous ranges and hurling projectiles at unbelievable speeds, you've just encountered the mad scientist, Mikey. Who's contacted me recently, and actually this came up too. And just to bust off into this one for a second, I'm a huge fan of the 1911 design. And for our listeners out there that have never seen a 1911 before, really cool looking gun. It's one of those really iconic semi-automatic designs. The Colt 45 is a 1911, and so. To get contacted by my buddy Mikey and to tell me that he's eyeballing this certain make and model, I really was floored when I first met this guy. Great guy, wild man behind the reloading setup. He definitely produces some of the craziest ammo I've ever seen, and love working with him. Haven't seen enough of him lately. But he always had this penchant for driving Magnum bullets to phenomenal velocities, and he started to realize that you could do these sort of things with semi-automatic handguns as well. And I watched him build some of the most incredibly powerful guns, and he's done it again. The mad scientist is on a tear. He's built another flame-throwing monster. Can't wait to drop this one on you guys. I'm definitely going to get myself to the range and spend a little time with Mikey and some of his insanely insanely powerful semi-automatic creations, and that's what they are. They're definitely works of art. He definitely spends a lot of care and attention to detail when he reloads for these types of things, and I can't wait to see his latest monstrosity. This thing's gonna be a lot of fun. You know, I'm looking forward to dropping it on you guys. I don't want to tell you what it is just yet. Be looking for a video up in the future. We're probably gonna get it filmed sometime next month, so it'll probably be about a month and a bit before you'll see it. But we've got some of that stuff coming. It's been a while since we've been on the lines. Really sorry. The SHOT Show took the steam right out of my engine. If there was ever an event that I would love participating in that would take the wind out of my sails, it was SHOT Show 2018. Dave's been working really hard on the videos, and he's been putting them out to you guys. We are definitely going to get out onto the firing lines again soon. It's been a while. Definitely some people I want to get out there and shoot with. Sorry I had to take a little break there for a bit, folks. You know, between running around and getting the merchandise out to everybody that's ordering it. Thank you so much to everyone that's supported us. You know, you guys, you buy the merchandise. It really makes a big difference. It's a lot of work doing it, but I love doing it, and I love seeing the gear out there, and I'm really looking forward to seeing a lot on the spring lineup and the different clubs I go to. If you haven't gotten yours yet, please visit our online store, you know, and support us that way. It's a big help. And so to further comment on Mikey. Mikey gets in touch with me and he asked me about this one gun, and I knew it was coming. I was really excited way back when to show Mike this one model that came through my hands at one point. You know, a collector had offered up to allow me to shoot a LAR Grizzly, which is a 1911 design, but it's you know, it's much bigger. You know, it's bigger than the Coonan. The Coonan's a bit of a handful. It's just a bit bigger than your standard 1911. The LAR Grizzly is definitely a much larger gun. It's not like Desert Eagle large, like girth-wise, but it's still got that sort of slim, by comparison, sort of feel to it, right down to the grips, which, you know, are not unlike holding you know, an oblong 2x4 sort of shape in your hand. It's definitely a handful, but it hurls. It was made to hurl this, you know, 45 caliber projectile. Think like 45 ACP doing like 1,400 feet per second. You know, like it's definitely a hot round coming out of this big gun. Anyway, Mikey contacts me and he says, you know, he's got his eye on one, which I always knew was going to happen. You know, he's just too big a fan of Magnum caliber semi-automatic, especially, you know, he wanted to get into vintage stuff. I told him a long time ago he was probably going to be wise to examine the LAR Grizzly family of firearms, and sure enough, you know, he's contacted me just recently making inquiries about the values on the guns, and that he's found one. And I'm very excited. I don't know what Mikey's going to do with this thing. I do know that you know, they were made with barrel conversion kits. That 45 Win Mag cartridge is you know, about the same power level as, say, a 44 Magnum. It's a little more, actually. But the guns also came with these well-made, very well-made conversion kits for calibers ranging from 10mm to 45 ACP to 357. There's a couple of Wildcat cartridges. I think like something like 375 Wild E Magnum. I know Mike's a big fan. He's always loving, you know, 357, and the idea of a mid-size caliber coming out of you know, a handgun-sized platform, you know, at rifle-like speeds is certainly an idea that I'm sure would fascinate Mike. I'm really interested to see what he comes up with on this one. But to return back again to you know, some of the things that have been going on lately, I find myself looking more and more at you know, the ridiculous ballet of politics. I talk about this stuff with a very heavy heart. Definitely, we've got Justin Trudeau doing some things that are inexplicably seemingly poorly thought out decisions are happening all over the place up in Parliament. And we're expected to believe that they're going to drop, some good legislation on us. I definitely am spending a little bit more time on the feeds, watching carefully what's going on up in there. I don't expect we're going to get much of a sympathetic ear this time around. It's becoming painfully obvious that we're going to have to deal with, a bump in the road. And while I did want to make this entire podcast about things like future legislation and bummer items like that, we got a few other, good things coming up in the firearm community. March 24th, there's going to be a TACCOM Expo put on at Firearms Outlet Canada. I'm looking forward to dropping by there and doing that with the crew. Might get a few of the Canadian Gun Vault members out there on that same day. Should be a good time. I'm thinking that we're probably going to be there for at least the better part of the day. And, not working it, we're just going to be floating around and looking forward to meeting some of the great personalities in the industry and, introducing ourselves. There's quite a few people out there that I've been dying to meet. Rod Giltaca, I think, is going to be there. And if he's around, I'm looking forward to shaking that man's hand. I mean, he in large part is a good reason why I started this. He seemed to be the voice of reason. I haven't watched it yet, but I understand he had a little TV spot just recently. I'm really looking forward to watching that, actually. I'm going to probably do that the minute I put this podcast microphone down. But looking forward to meeting Rod Giltaca. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he's the godfather of the firearms rights movement here in Canada. And, to spend a little bit of time talking to him. I know he's going to be very busy. If you could set aside maybe 5 minutes for me, I definitely would like to shake his hand, congratulate him on a job well done, and look forward to speaking with him, at length down the road about the future of firearm ownership in this country. Anyway, that's about all the time I have for tonight's episode of the Canadian Gun Vault's Behind the Vault Door. My name is Mark Morelli, and as always, Canada, shoot straight, stay safe.